Hello and welcome, friends, to this session on sampling. You would recall that in our earlier interactions, we had discussed the sampling theory and different types of sampling techniques that we can use, the probability sampling and the non-probability sampling. Out of the first type, that is probability sampling, we had discussed in detail the simple random sampling, and then a more objective version of it, which was called the systematic sampling. Thereafter, we had also discussed the stratified sampling in detail. Now, before moving on to cluster sampling, uh, I would want to remind you of the discussions that we had about what mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive subsets mean, and what do we mean by homogeneous stratum, and what do we mean by heterogeneity. Why am I saying this? Because these terms are also going to be relevant to our discussion regarding the cluster sampling. So should we start? Right. Now, what do we do in cluster sampling? You would see that there are so many points of similarities between cluster sampling and stratified sampling. Uh, but of course, there are some differences also. In cluster sampling also, just like in stratified sampling, you had you have to divide the population into two or more clusters. There you were dividing the population into two or more strata, while here you have to divide them into clusters. These clusters have to be mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive. I'm not going to uh, repeat the definition of mutually exclusive. For that, you can refer to my earlier video lecture. So the population has to be divided into mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive clusters. Now, what is the difference between a cluster and strata? See the second line. Clusters you will get when you are dividing a population into subgroups, and the elements in these subgroups are heterogeneous, while different subgroups are almost similar, homogeneous. Then you will call these subgroups as clusters. On the other hand, if elements within a particular subgroup are similar, while elements in different subgroups are very different, then you will call these subgroups, you will refer to these subgroups as strata. Is this okay? So that is the main difference between strata and cluster, and here what you have to do is you have to divide the population into clusters, and these clusters will have to be, have a look at the second line, these clusters will have to be formed in a manner that the element within a particular cluster are heterogeneous, different, while different clusters have to be homogeneous, they have to be similar. So this is how you'll have to divide the population into clusters. Once you have done that, then the second stage, the second step would be picking up some clusters randomly from the total number of clusters that you have got in the first step. So I'm giving an example. Suppose I've divided the population into 20 clusters, and I have picked up 4 clusters randomly out of these 20. Then it becomes, then this is the second step. Basically, you have to pick up 4 clusters. Now, if I include all the elements in these 4 clusters in my sample, that is, I pick up all the 4 clusters that I have randomly chosen in their entirety as my sample, then it will be called the one stage clustering. All the elements, have a look at what has been written here, all the elements in thus selected clusters are included in the sample. It becomes one stage clustering. Now, what about the two stage clustering? We'll be also having a two stage clustering. Now here we would not be picking up all the elements from these 4 clusters that we have chosen out of a total of 20 clusters. Instead, what we'll do in the second step, we had randomly picked up 4 clusters, but in the third step, what we'll do, we will pick up only some of the elements from each of these clusters. Remember, not all the elements from each of these 4 clusters, only some elements from each of these 4 clusters, and then it will be termed as two-stage clustering. Why two-stage clustering? Because see, random selection has taken place twice. First, we selected randomly, we selected 4 clusters from a group of 20 clusters, and on the second occasion what we did was we randomly selected some elements from each of these 4 clusters. So that is why it is called two-stage clustering, and this way we can have 3-stage or 4-stage and 5-stage clustering as well. So 3-stage and more than 3-stage clustering, they are basically clubbed into one, and they are called multi-stage clustering. Now what will happen in multi-stage clustering? Once we have done the second step, we have, let's say we have picked up 4 clusters from a group of 20 clusters. See what will happen in the multi-stage clustering. Now from each of these 4 clusters, we will again randomly pick up subclusters. What does this mean? This means we'll have to again do the clustering in each of these 4 clusters, and then we'll pick up some subclusters. And now, if elements in the selected subclusters are included in the sample, then it would become basically a 3-stage clustering. And since more than 2 stage is always called multi-stage clustering, we can term it as multi-stage clustering. We can always have 4-stage or 5-stage clustering as well. This is fine. Now I'll give you an example to make you understand the whole concept better. Suppose I have to conduct a study across the country. This is fine. If I have to conduct this study across the country and I have to take the sample from across and I have to go for probability sampling, then one option which is available to me is the random sampling, which we had discussed in the earlier video sessions. Now what will happen? Let's say my population of interest is 80 crores. So what will I do? I'll assign every single unit in this population some particular number, 1, 2, 3, 4, so on and so forth. And then what will I do? I'll use the random number table, and I'll pick up some number from the random number table, and accordingly the population unit which has been assigned that particular number will be chosen as my sample. This is what will happen in random sampling. But what will happen here is this may take a lot of your time. Why? Because the first sample that you might choose, the first random number that gets generated may be assigned to somebody in Jammu Kashmir. The second number which gets generated may be assigned to somebody in, let's say, Sikkim. The third number may be assigned to somebody in Andaman Nicobar, and the fourth number may be assigned to somebody in Gujarat. So it will cost you a lot of time and money. So just to reduce your efforts, we go for cluster sampling. What will we do here? And this would be a type of probability sampling. We will divide the whole country into clusters. Let's say I divide the whole country into 29 states. There are 29 states, so I'll divide the whole country into 29 states. So these would be clusters for my purpose. Now, if let's say I pick up 3 of these 29 states, that basically I'm referring to the second step which has been shown in this particular flow chart. So if I pick up 3 states out of these 29 states, and then I include all the population units in these 3 states, then it would be my 1-stage clustering. On the other hand, once I have picked up 3 states out of 29 states, then within each of these 3 states, I at random pick up some elements of the population as my sample. Not all the population, not all the units in the population in the 3 states, but only some elements of the population in these states, and that too in a random fashion. then it would become two-stage clustering. Okay, now I can do slightly, the whole thing can be done in a slightly different fashion also. What I can do is I can go for a three-stage or a four-stage, or let's say a multi-stage clustering also. What I do, I have already picked up three states. Now what I do, out of in these three states, then I go for picking up subclusters. How do I pick up subclusters in three different states? I'll pick up five districts in each of these three states. So the state 1 that I had picked up, state 2, state 3, in each of these states I'll pick up five districts. And then if I include all the population units in these five districts in each of these states, then basically this would be three-stage clustering. Is this understood? So what I've done is basically, first I've divided the whole population into 29 states, 29 clusters. Then what I did was I picked up three clusters, three states. Had I taken all the elements in these three clusters, it would have been one stage clustering. If I go for two-stage clustering, what will I do? In all these three states, I will pick up only few elements from all these three states. Not all the elements, not all the population units in each of these states, but only a few of them, and that too randomly. Then it will become two-stage clustering. If I want to conduct a three-stage clustering, what will I do? I will, in the three states that I have picked up randomly, what will I do? I will select five districts each in each of these three states. This will be a total of 15 districts spread across three different states, and this will be a three-stage clustering. If I include all the elements in these 15 districts, this would be three-stage clustering. I can also go for four-stage clustering, wherein what will I do? In these 15 districts, I don't pick up all the elements in these 15 districts. I only pick up some of the population units of these 15 districts. This would become a four-stage clustering procedure. Is this okay? So this way I can go on and I can have multi-stage clustering also. Is this understood? Now this will reduce your time and effort. How? Please understand, I have picked up only three states. Let's say these three states are, let's say, Uttarakhand, Tamil Nadu and Sikkim. And this is far more convenient to me because in random sampling I had to traverse the whole of the country. In random sampling, what was happening was that one sample was chosen and it belonged to, let's say, Jammu Kashmir. The other one was chosen, it belonged to some other state. So I had to travel all these states. But now I only have to go to three states. I only have to go to Uttarakhand, Sikkim and Tamil Nadu. So because these were the three states that I had picked up randomly out of 29 states, so I only have to travel in these three states. So this will be a reduction of my time and efforts, and that is why many times we go for cluster sampling to reduce your time and efforts and to, of course, control your expenditures. Is this okay? So this is all about cluster sampling. In my next video session, we'll have to keep these video sessions a little short, and that is why I would not be discussing the non-probability sampling techniques in this particular video session. I'll reserve this non-probability sampling techniques for the next session. Therein we'll be discussing them. We'll be discussing all the four types of non-probability sampling techniques, and if possible for us, we will also be discussing the various sampling errors that might pollute your results. So that's all for today. Thank you very much.